In my experience, the hi-hat cymbal can be a really stressful part of life for a band director. This clutch can come apart, students might unscrew it, even if they don't, general wear and tear sometimes moves it to where you don't want it. And just adjusting the height of the cymbals can sometimes be really tricky. My recommendation is to look for a Gibraltar quick release clutch. Those were a lifesaver when I found them at my first job. This is not one, but you install the whole thing. It's pretty simple. Follow the instructions, install it with your cymbals, and then when you need to, it's just a push button that will pull the whole thing apart if you need to adjust something. So right here, this one's set up really well. I'll let you see in here. So if I'm gonna loosen this nut right here, I'm gonna press the pedal all the way down so that the cymbal doesn't fall, so it's down. Then I'm gonna loosen this up. And when I let go, the rod comes right up, and I can lift the cymbal as far as I want. So you can see you have your felt here. There should be a felt on the bottom too. There is, before it's held in the cup. And then there's a felt on top. Always just felt between metal. That's the only thing you really have to remember, is felt between metal to prevent extra noises. So now I'm gonna put it back down. And so here's how, if your cymbal looks like this and you don't really know how to help your percussionist fix it, press the pedal down slightly. So you're gonna see, if you can notice, this rod is moving down, and as far down as you move it, that's how far your cymbal is going to come up once you tighten here. So I tighten it, and now when I release the pedal, the rod's going to come back up, and this time it's going to bring the cymbal with it. That's not quite as far as they had it on this setup, so I'll do it just a little farther, but that might be far enough for me. Depends on what your song is, what your percussionist wants, what sound you want. So let's talk about beginning on the set. What I like to teach my students first, and I start as young as junior high with this one because they are motivated. They might not have a gig on the drum set sometime soon, but they usually love it and can't wait to play it. So when I give a beginning lesson, I will tell them to walk their feet back and forth. So take your right foot on the bass drum, and then your left foot on the hi-hat. And it's just gonna be beat 1, beat 2, beat 3, beat 4. So you heard the sound difference there. So then I have to be a little more specific and tell them the bass drum foot should release and lift right back up again, but the hi-hat foot should stay down as long as possible. So it's... Okay, and there are two ways to play with your legs. You can either play with just your toes, that's what I was doing, or you can play with your heels as well. You'll see the whole leg come up. That's going to depend on the style of song. It's going to depend on how the performer's comfortable. This one is a lot more movement, so it's less efficient, but sometimes it's what you have to do to get the right amount of sound. And also sometimes your muscles and your ankles are going to get a little bit tired of doing what you're doing. So I start them with their feet only. I don't give them sticks at all. If they can handle the walk back and forth, I give them one stick. I tell them their left hand plays the snare drum, and they're going to connect the whole left side of their body. Their left hand and their left leg are totally connected. So it still is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, right, left, right, left. Most kids can handle those first 3 steps together. When you introduce the 4th step, this is when it gets tricky. And it's not just because it's hard to do, but it's also because it's using both sides of your brain. It's a cross-brain activity. It's a cross-body activity. This is hard. So then I have them just do quarter notes on the hi-hat. I tell them on every right and every left, you'll continue the hi-hat no matter what. And then because this is so hard, I usually don't ask them to do all 4 at the same time right away. I ask them to do 2 of them at a time. Choose 2 of these 4 things I just taught you and do them together. So what if I just leave this foot planted and I use my right foot and my right hand to go every single one, every single beat and every other beat. So it's beat 1, beat 2, beat 3, beat 4. Now, obviously in the future, we're gonna trade this over to eighth notes, but we don't need to start there. And sometimes it's easier for kids to eventually move over to eighth notes, and sometimes it's harder. So then what I'll ask them to do is maybe just do their hands alone. So again, keep your left foot down on this one so it's not ringy and obnoxious. So then we have, and this time it's 1, 1. Or this is where it's easier sometimes to do eighth notes. Only because they've heard that rhythm so many times. We didn't talk about setup, but as far as setup is concerned, every single drummer is different. Their legs are going to be longer and shorter than each other. They're going to want this closer or shorter. This one for me personally is a little too high right now because I am running my two hands together with this. So I would lower the snare for this one for sure. So another thing we could do is try to just do the 3 without the right foot, leave the bass drum out. Again, your left foot and your left hand are working together, and this one's doing eighth notes or quarter notes. And if a kid can get to there, a kid can accompany us on a pep band tune, and somebody else in the band can give us a solid 1-3 bass drum beat. That's a confidence builder for that student. But ultimately, all 4 should be able to happen together. And they should understand when they start to hear it that that hi-hat lift is what gives us the little extra ring of the cymbal on beat 2. If they're excited to move on to fills, that's when I outsource it. I always tell kids, hey, go look up fills. I mentioned before, Dorothy Taylor is a fantastic percussionist. She has a lot of cool stuff. She'll show you some different fills or some different grooves. Recently, I just learned a cool paradiddle groove from her. You do a paradiddle with the snare drum and the bass drum. So paradiddle is right, left, right, right, and then left, right, left, left. It's pretty tricky, but it's really a cool groove, and some of your advanced high schoolers will think that's pretty cool. And then you're supposed to be able to add the cymbal. That's a little much for me. I've only been practicing this for a couple times, so. In jazz technique, I always tell my kids the very basics. The changes I have them make are play the bass drum on all 4 beats. Then we move from the hi-hat cymbal to the ride cymbal. I don't know if you can see it in this frame right here. I usually have them play on the bell, and I say skip down the road, down the road. I say skip because it helps them remember to swing. And then you should be able to put them all together. 3 things is a lot, so have them just start with the bass drum and the cymbal. The snare drum in when they're ready. And it's helpful to point out that when they play the snare drum, it's always on the word down.